I said move. You can't stand here. This event is for high-profile guests, not for people like you.
Actually, I believe you work for my foundation tonight.
The air outside the marquette shimmered with the kind of wealth that didn't whisper, it roared. Luxury cars lined the curb of the Buckhead venue like trophies, each polished until the buildings reflected off their glass. Inside, chandeliers waited to dazzle, string quartets tuned their instruments, and champagne already poured for the soft launch of Atlanta's most exclusive gala of the season, the Unity Benefit Ball. It was Cecilia Monroe's gala. Her foundation had funded the entire evening, from the string lights dangling over the rooftop garden to the lobster ravioli plated by one of Georgia's top chefs. But no one knew that just yet. And that's why she was standing outside, being treated like a nuisance. Cecilia, 70, stood patiently at the front steps, one hand resting gently on the strap of her worn leather purse. Her deep brown skin glowed in the low-setting sun, soft silver curls tucked neatly beneath a navy headscarf. She wore a pearl-button blouse and a flowing khaki skirt, elegant, simple, and intentionally unassuming. Her posture was straight, her demeanor soft-spoken. She looked like someone's grandmother coming from a church meeting. Which, perhaps, is why she was being ignored. I said, "Deliveries go around back," snapped a sharp voice. Cecilia turned slightly. A white woman, early 30s, tall, slim, and with the kind of expression that reeked of entitlement, stood holding a clipboard. Her platinum hair was tied into a tight ponytail. She wore a black polo shirt with a tiny embroidered logo, Rose Plus Birch Catering Company. Cecilia's brow lifted slightly. "I'm not here for a delivery," she said gently. "I'm attending the event." The woman scoffed. "This event? The Unity Gala?" She looked her up and down. "No, guests are inside drinking champagne, not out here asking where to go. This is a black tie event. No offense." Cecilia tilted her head slightly. "And you are?" "Whitney." The woman tapped her clipboard like punctuation. "Lead event manager for catering. I literally built this event from the ground up. Trust me, I know the guest list. You're not on it." Cecilia kept her composure, though something in her chest began to tighten. "Actually," she said softly, "I believe you work for my foundation tonight. The Monroe Foundation. We contracted Rose Plus Birch for catering." Whitney blinked once, then smirked. "That's cute. I know who the sponsor is. She's some rich widow or something, right? Nobody's seen her. I was told she wouldn't be attending." Cecilia raised one brow. "And who told you that?" "My boss," Whitney said quickly, shifting slightly, as if she'd been caught bluffing. "Anyway, if you're not a guest, I need you to move. We've got influencers coming in the next half hour and she waved vaguely, "your presence is confusing people." Just then, a photographer brushed past, snapping shots of a couple stepping out of a Rolls-Royce. Flashbulbs lit the sky. People gawked and smiled for the cameras. And Cecilia was still standing outside her own event. Whitney turned, already walking away. "You can drop whatever delivery you've got with the back team. Tell them Whitney sent you." Cecilia's hand dipped into her purse. Slowly, deliberately, her fingers brushed the cold edge of the badge she hadn't planned on showing, at least not like this. She pulled it out. Gold-trimmed. Laminate glossy. Her name in block letters. Cecilia Monroe. Executive sponsor, Unity Gala. Monroe Foundation. Whitney paused mid-step. Her clipboard lowered an inch. Her face froze, caught between confusion and dawning embarrassment. "I'm not here to deliver anything," Cecilia said calmly. "I'm here to see where my money went." Whitney's face flushed. Her lips parted, but no words came out. A few heads nearby turned. One of the valet drivers, a young black man who had overheard everything, smirked under his breath and gave a small, respectful nod to Cecilia. Just then, a man in a dark suit emerged from the glass doors. "Miss Monroe," he called out, beaming. It was Marcus Langston, the gala's program director. "We've been waiting on you. Everyone's inside. We're about to toast in your name." Cecilia stepped forward. "Apparently," she said, her eyes brushing over Whitney's paling face, "not everyone was waiting." Marcus's smile faltered slightly as he glanced between them. "Is there a problem?" Whitney jumped in. I didn't know. I wasn't told she'd be. She wasn't supposed to need an introduction, Cecilia interrupted, her voice steady. Because women like me shouldn't have to explain why we belong. Especially not to someone who's being paid by our foundation. There was nothing loud about her tone. No shouting. No threats. But it hit with the weight of thunder. Marcus straightened, now clearly grasping the moment. Miss Monroe, please, let me escort you personally. Cecilia nodded once and walked toward the grand entrance. The velvet rope lifted without a word. Whitney stood frozen at the bottom of the steps, the clipboard trembling slightly in her hands. Her voice, her authority, thun. Inside, champagne flutes clinked. Applause rose. And behind her, the woman everyone assumed didn't belong took her rightful place at the head of the table. But outside, by the curb, judgment still lingered, dressed in a catering uniform and reeking of classism. Tonight, it had been exposed. Cecilia stepped across the threshold of the Marquette's ballroom, the cool air conditioning meeting the warmth on her skin like a whispered welcome. The room pulsed with elegance, white linens draped across every table, floral centerpieces taller than toddlers, and candlelight flickering inside gold-trimmed lanterns. It was stunning, exactly as she'd envisioned it during countless meetings, contracts, and wire transfers. But as she walked deeper into the space, the applause that had risen at her name already began to fade. Conversations resumed. Flutes were raised. Laughter echoed off marble walls. And while Marcus Langston, the event director, tried to walk close beside her, shielding her from further embarrassment, Cecilia knew what she had stepped into. She had funded this room. But she was not expected to own it. Your table's right this way, Miss Monroe, Marcus said, gesturing toward a VIP round near the stage, where a white linen napkin had been folded into the shape of a swan and placed beside a polished silver place card. Her name was printed on it. But the chair was empty when she arrived, and still, no one at the table rose to greet her. 3 people were already seated there, 2 investors and a woman from the mayor's office. All 3 looked up at her with thin, polite smiles, the kind reserved for someone who'd just been scolded in public but now needed to be tolerated. Evening, Cecilia said, nodding gently as she took her seat. No one replied with words. Marcus fidgeted beside her. Let me just check on the program order, he said quickly, then vanished into the crowd. Cecilia smoothed the edge of her napkin and exhaled through her nose. She wasn't new to this. The white rooms, the shallow eyes, the long silences that came not from ignorance but from the discomfort of being reminded that old money doesn't always come with old whiteness. She didn't need validation. But she needed this night to mean something. Across the room, cameras clicked as an influencer couple posed dramatically in front of the Unity Gala backdrop. Servers swept through the crowd like choreography, refilling glasses with a speed that suggested the drinks were more important than the purpose. Cecilia watched it all. The glitz, the glimmer, the smiling masks. It was beautiful. It was also hollow. She turned as a young black woman in catering uniform approached her table, curly hair tucked under a cap, sweat beading along her hairline. Miss Monroe, she whispered, leaning down slightly. Can I say something real quick? Cecilia nodded. I just want to say thank you. For tonight. For the scholarship fund. My younger brother applied for one of the Monroe grants last month. He's the first in our family to even talk about college. Cecilia's eyes softened. What's his name? Darius, she smiled. He's 15. Wants to build apps, like, for black-owned businesses. Cecilia reached into her bag, pulled out a pen, and scribbled on her place card. Give this to him, she said. Tell him I expect a thank you letter. Handwritten. The server beamed. Yes, ma'am. As the young woman turned to leave, Cecilia caught the sight of Whitney across the room, standing by the bar, red-faced and whispering into her phone. She was visibly shaken now, no longer the woman barking orders at the door. Her clipboard was gone. Her poise was cracked. But that wasn't enough. Whitney wasn't the disease. She was a symptom. And Cecilia had learned long ago. Treating symptoms without confronting systems is how injustice survives. She stood slowly and made her way to Marcus, who was now conferring with the audiovisual team near the side of the stage. Is the program ready? She asked. Yes, we're right on schedule. You'll be introduced in about 20 minutes. Want me to get your talking points? No, she said firmly. I'm not using a script tonight. Marcus hesitated. You sure? There's a teleprompter ready. I'm sure, Cecilia said, voice like velvet-covered steel. The truth doesn't need a teleprompter. She turned away before he could respond, her eyes sweeping across the room, not just taking in faces, but reading them. Some glanced and looked away quickly. Others smiled weakly. Most tried not to see her at all. Then her gaze landed on the staff. The black and brown servers weaving between tables. The Latino woman in housekeeping uniform peeking through a side door. The older man with salt and pepper hair directing valet traffic outside the glass wall. They were the ones watching her, not with politeness, but with hope. Cecilia had no intention of letting that hope down. By the time her name was announced on stage, the crowd offered polite applause. A few rose. Some clapped more loudly now that the cameras were watching. But she noticed the hesitation, the tension, the quiet discomfort of an audience realizing they had made their benefactor wait at the door. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC said, the woman who made this evening possible, Miss Cecilia Monroe. She took the stage without hesitation. No notes. No fanfare. Just a microphone and a silence waiting to be filled. Good evening, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. I wasn't planning to speak long tonight. I thought I'd enjoy this event quietly. Maybe sip a little champagne, smile through some speeches, and watch the good work being done in our community. But sometimes, silence is a privilege I can't afford. The room stilled. She continued. Earlier tonight I was told to leave. Not by protesters. Not by criminals. But by someone being paid by the very foundation that funded this evening. She let that settle. The crowd stiffened. I was told I didn't belong. That I wasn't dressed properly. That I must be a delivery person. All because I chose to show up as myself, without glitter, without titles, without pretending. No one moved. I didn't create this gala so we could sit under chandeliers and pretend we're better than the people who serve us. I didn't write that check so we could pat ourselves on the back. I did it because change starts with discomfort. And tonight, some of you felt it. She paused, scanning the crowd. Even Marcus looked shaken. That discomfort? That tension? That's the doorway to accountability. And if tonight showed anything, it's that the doors still need opening. A hush fell over the room like a blanket of stone. Cecilia stepped away from the mic, walked down the steps, and didn't return to her seat. Instead, she walked straight toward the staff hallway, where the servers and cooks and cleaners watched her like she was a queen in sneakers. And she smiled. Because tonight, she didn't come to be celebrated. She came to pull back the curtain. And now that it was open, she had no intention of closing it again. The applause faded behind her as Cecilia walked past the banquet tables and down a narrow hallway flanked by steel doors and exit signs. The scent shifted from white wine and roses to something more grounded, garlic, sweat, disinfectant, and fresh linen. The lighting overhead changed too, from golden chandeliers to flickering fluorescent strips that buzzed with indifference. She had stepped out of the spotlight and into the spine of the building, the place where the illusion was held together by people who were never meant to be seen. A young man in a dishwashing apron nearly collided with her as he rounded a corner. Whoa, I'm sorry, ma'am. He paused mid-sentence, recognition washing over him. Are you? Yes, Cecilia said gently, adjusting her scarf. And don't worry. You didn't bump into the wrong person. You bumped into the right one. He stepped aside, his eyes wide. Cecilia kept walking. The hallway opened into a bustling service area just behind the ballroom. Stainless steel counters ran the length of the room, stacked high with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Large industrial ovens hummed behind swinging doors, and servers in black uniforms darted between carts and crates, calling out table numbers and drink orders. The room stilled when they noticed her. She didn't belong back here, not in the way they'd been trained to understand belonging. Executive sponsors didn't walk past the bus bins. Benefactors didn't lean on steel countertops or duck beneath heat lamps. But here she was. Cecilia nodded to a Latina woman folding napkins in a corner. "Hi there," she said. "I'm Cecilia." The woman blinked, unsure whether she was being tested. "I know who you are," she said softly. "We've been watching the speeches from the hallway door." Cecilia smiled. "What's your name?" "Carmen." "And how long have you been working events like this?" Carmen looked down. 3 years. Mostly weekends. They said if I worked tonight, I'd get an extra shift. I didn't know. I didn't know it was your event." "I imagine no one thought to tell you," Cecilia replied, voice even. "Or tell Whitney to treat you like a human being." At the mention of Whitney, Carmen's face stiffened. Cecilia noticed. "Go ahead. Say it." "I'm here now." "She's cruel," Carmen whispered. "Always yelling, always calling people, you people. We eat on crates because she says we're not allowed to sit at the staff tables. She throws things sometimes. I saw her throw a plate at a dishwasher once. Called him lazy because he asked for help with a jam disposal." "She's still working this event?" Cecilia asked. Carmen nodded. "Last I saw, she was outside on her phone. Crying." Cecilia gave a short exhale. Not satisfaction, just clarity. Another server, a young black man with dreadlocks tucked under a cap, stepped forward from the prep station. "I didn't think anyone upstairs saw us," he said. "But we saw you. All of us. You walked past her. Walked through her." Cecilia turned to him. "What's your name?" "Germaine." "Well, Germaine," she said, "thank you for seeing me. Because tonight, seeing is the most radical thing we can do." Behind her, others began gathering, cautiously at first, then with quiet confidence. Busboys, servers, janitorial crew. People who had been stepping around wealth their entire careers but never once invited into a conversation with it. "I didn't come back here to make a scene," Cecilia continued, her voice now reaching the room. "I came because truth lives back here. And I can't fix what I haven't heard." A silence followed, full but uncertain. Then a woman in her 50s, wearing orthopedic shoes and a hairnet, stepped forward. Her name tag said Mabel. "I've been working this venue for 12 years, she said, folding her arms. "And in all that time, I've never once had a sponsor talk to me. We clean the crystal after y'all leave. We sweep the red carpet so you don't see the scuff marks in the morning. We go home to our kids with our feet blistered and our backs aching, and we're not even allowed to take leftovers without permission." A murmur of agreement rolled through the room. Mabel wasn't done. "Tonight, when Whitney saw you at the door, we were back here watching on the monitor. She didn't just assume you were staff. She spat it, like it was beneath her. We felt that. Cecilia felt it too, like a needle slipping into skin, quiet but undeniable. "Do you know what the word unity means?" Cecilia asked the room. "It doesn't mean seating VIPs by status. It doesn't mean making speeches to donors and ignoring the hands that carried the chairs. Unity means everyone in the building matters, whether they enter through the lobby or through the freight elevator." Germaine raised his hand. "Can I ask something?" "Of course. What happens when this night's over? When the speeches stop? Are we going to be back here tomorrow with Whitney still screaming at us like nothing changed?" Cecilia paused. It was the most important question so far. "No," she said, slow and deliberate. "That ends tonight." She pulled her phone from her purse. With calm precision, she dialed the number of Rose Plus Birch's founder, a woman she had met once at a fundraising dinner, and whose company was about to feel the weight of her disappointment. "Madeline," she said once the call picked up. "Yes, it's Cecilia Monroe. I'm standing in the service hallway at the Marquette. I just spent the last 20 minutes listening to your staff tell me about Whitney, your employee, who treated me like a stranger and treats them like they're disposable." She paused. "No, I'm not asking for a refund. I'm asking for a resignation. Hers. Tonight." Silence on the other end. Then scrambling. Cecilia listened. Then hung up. "She won't be coming back to work here," she told the room. There were no cheers. Just a deep breath that passed through them all like a breeze breaking a heat wave. Cecilia turned to Germaine. "Let me ask you a question now," she said. "What would you do if the next gala wasn't just for you, but with you?" He tilted his head. With us. Just. What if we stopped pretending unity is something that happens under chandeliers and started building it under fluorescent lights, together? The room was quiet. Then Mabel smiled, not wide but real. That would be a first, she said. But I'd show up for that. Cecilia nodded. Then let's start something. The ballroom never looked more hollow. Cecilia returned just as the dessert platters were being cleared, but no one seemed to notice. Or rather, they pretended not to. Conversations resumed, but with less enthusiasm. The energy had shifted. Her name floated between tables like a spilled glass of wine, staining reputations, making people nervous, impossible to ignore. She had fired Whitney. Mid-event. Publicly. And worse, in the eyes of some, she had walked into the service corridor, the back of the house, and stayed there longer than what was appropriate. There had always been a line at events like these. A quiet, invisible cord that separated the donors from the doers. Cecilia had just stepped over it with both feet and no apologies. And while a few staff whispered thank you under their breath and nodded as she passed, many of the guests, the old guard, the polished elite, looked at her now as if she were unpredictable. Dangerous. The very room she built had turned on her. She didn't mind. But she did notice. Marcus approached from the wings of the ballroom, clipboard still in hand though his confidence had long since faded. Miss Monroe, he said, quieter than usual. Can I speak with you for a moment? Privately? She nodded and followed him into a side room just off the main hall. A small VIP lounge with a velvet couch and crystal decanters no one had touched all night. He closed the door behind them. I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear me fully before reacting, he began. That's how most betrayals start, Cecilia said calmly. But go ahead. He hesitated, then continued. There's some concern, from the board. The Gala committee. They're hearing things. That you reprimanded the catering lead on the floor. That you spent more time with kitchen staff than donors. That you dismissed the woman coordinating the service without consulting anyone. Cecilia folded her hands. I didn't dismiss her. I removed her. For cause. I believe you, he said quickly, but the optics? There it is, she said, her voice tightening. The optics. Not the ethics, Marcus. Not the impact. Just how it looks to people who've never once set foot in the service corridor. He stepped back, pressing a palm to his forehead. You're making this difficult. No. I'm making it honest. He let out a breath. Some of the major donors are unsettled. They're asking if your foundation is pivoting toward, well, labor advocacy. Cecilia narrowed her eyes. You mean they're asking if the help is getting too loud? I didn't say that, Marcus muttered. You didn't need to. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rooftop garden where a group of guests posed with branded champagne flutes and hashtags. I built this night to raise money, she said, her voice reflective. To fund scholarships. Feed small businesses. Get real work done in the city. But now I see that was never enough. Because you can't build equity on top of silence. You can't talk about unity in the ballroom while condoning abuse behind the curtain. I'm not saying you're wrong, Marcus said. I'm saying you're alienating power. Cecilia turned to him. I am the power. And for a moment he believed her. Entirely. But that didn't stop the storm from coming. By morning, the headlines were gentle, at least on the surface. Unity Gala draws praise and questions after sponsor's bold speech. Cecilia Monroe's powerful message, but at what cost? Gala upstaged by controversy, caterer's resignation shakes event. But beneath the headlines, there were phone calls. A board member, thin-lipped and worried about optics, asked to clarify Cecilia's comments on class inequality. Another, more blunt, warned that a few donors had already called to withdraw future commitments, not because they disagreed with her stance, but because they felt singled out. Her own foundation CEO, Marlene, called with concern. They're saying you made it political, she said. Cecilia was sitting at her kitchen table, a cup of mint tea in hand and her slippers still on. The morning sun was bleeding through her curtains. It was political, Cecilia replied. Every act of silence at that event was political. The seating chart was political. The lack of a single staff name in the printed program was political. Marlene sighed. You know I'm with you. But they're calling this a moment of reckoning, and not everyone wants to reckon. Cecilia let the silence stretch. Then she said, let them walk. You mean that? I do. And I'll tell you why. Because if the price of keeping donors is tolerating mistreatment of the very people we claim to be lifting up, then our mission is a lie. And I didn't spend 40 years building this just to lie. Marlene didn't argue. Instead, she said, what are you planning next? Cecilia leaned back in her chair and looked out the window. The birds were already fighting over breadcrumbs on her patio. I think it's time we changed how these galas work. Permanently. That afternoon, Cecilia scheduled a staff meeting, not for the board, not for the donors, but for the employees of the Monroe Foundation. The assistants, the receptionists, the interns, the program officers who worked 12-hour days writing grant reports and never got mentioned at podiums. They gathered in the community wing of her foundation headquarters, a glass building nestled in West End, far from the champagne-soaked blocks of Buckhead. Cecilia stood at the front with no slides, no script. Just a whiteboard and a conviction that had long outgrown her silence. This isn't about Whitney, she began. She was a mirror, a warning. But the real danger isn't her, it's the system that trained her. That allowed her behavior to thrive because it protected the comfort of the few over the dignity of the many. She paused and looked around. I want to change that. And I need you with me. A hand went up from the back. What do you mean, change it? A young program officer asked. I mean we rethink everything. Who gets invited? Who gets paid? Who gets celebrated? The next gala won't just have staff, it'll center them. You all will design it, plan it, set the agenda, and we'll bring the guests into your space. The room was still. Then someone clapped. And then another. And another. Until the room echoed with the kind of applause that wasn't for show, it was for liberation. The first name they forgot was Yvette. She'd worked 2 shifts the night of the gala, one as a prep cook before the doors opened, and another scrubbing trays once the guests had gone home. She didn't appear in a single photo. No one toasted to her. She wasn't thanked during the speeches, and when her son asked what she did that night, all she said was, I kept things running. Cecilia remembered Yvette. In fact, she remembered every name scribbled hastily on cardboard boxes backstage, every server whose name tag was replaced by the word staff, and every janitor who walked home with blisters while the crowd posted selfies with captions like #UnityBall2025. This time, she was going to do it differently. But changing a system meant shaking its foundations. And the moment she announced the new format for the next Monroe Foundation Gala, the walls began to tremble. The first emails came in the form of concerned inquiries. Subject lines read, clarification on new gala format. A few thoughts on the recent staff meeting. Optics of staff-centric event. But their content was predictable, polite, veiled threats wrapped in corporate language. We completely understand the intention behind this shift, one board member wrote, but centering support staff could alienate high-profile donors who expect a certain environment. Another message from a longtime partner warned that, while inclusivity is admirable, fundraising events work because they cater to influence. Cecilia read each one with an unmoved expression. She didn't reply right away. She let the discomfort marinate. Instead, she focused on the names. Not the ones embossed in gold on last year's VIP table placards. Not the CEOs, the politicians, or the socialites who sent donation receipts with headshots attached. She focused on the names like Mabel, like Jermaine, like Carmen. Those were the names she invited first. This year, there would be no red carpet. Instead, there would be a wall, floor to ceiling, where every name of every worker who had ever served at a Monroe Foundation event would be handwritten in bold ink. Not as decoration, as dedication. The stage would be moved to the center of the room. And this time, the guests would circle the staff. At the first planning session, Cecilia stood in front of a mixed crowd of interns, junior associates, janitorial workers, drivers, community partners, and only a handful of former donors brave enough to remain in the room. "We've spent 2 long building nights that please those who already have everything," she told them. "Now, we're building a night for the people who hold the city up, not from the top, but from underneath." Applause followed, but not everyone clapped. In the back, a man in a tailored navy blazer remained seated, arms crossed, a look of grim familiarity on his face. His name was Franklin Dade. Cecilia hadn't seen him in 12 years. He had once served on the board of the Monroe Foundation. He had also once told her, in a meeting full of white men, that she should smile more if she wanted to be taken seriously. She hadn't smiled for him since. Now he was back. And judging by the furrow in his brow, he hadn't changed. After the meeting, he approached her. "I see you're turning this into a labor movement," he said. "No," Cecilia replied. "I'm turning it back into a mission." He smiled the way men do when they're losing control and trying not to show it. "This foundation used to open doors for you. Don't forget that." "I haven't," she said. "That's why I'm opening doors for others." Franklin leaned in slightly. "Just remember, Cecilia, if you make the wrong people uncomfortable, your name can disappear faster than it rose." She looked him straight in the eye. "If my name disappears, it'll be written across 1,000 others who never had a chance to speak. That's a legacy I can live with." As the weeks passed, momentum grew. The new gala was now called The Hands That Built Us, a title suggested by a maintenance staff member named Regina who had once cleaned the windows at the original Monroe Foundation office on Edgewood. Instead of being held at the Marquette, the gala would take place at a historic black-owned event space in the West End. No chandeliers. No valet parking. Just long tables, food from local vendors, and a stage built by the same team that swept it. Vendors were paid in advance. All workers were listed in the program, by name, with photos, and their contributions. And Whitney? Well, she never returned. But the system that created her? It was still out there, fuming in silence, trying to hold the leash of a movement that no longer obeyed. Anonymous donors began pulling out. 3 high-profile sponsors sent polite withdrawal letters. Some tried to use press leaks to frame Cecilia as radical, combative, or divisive. But the more they resisted, the stronger the movement grew. Because the people behind the curtain had finally been handed a mic, and they were using it. The night before the gala, Cecilia sat alone in her office, going over final checklists. The building was quiet. Most had gone home. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Mabel, hair in a wrap, holding a tray of sweet tea and biscuits. "I know you don't usually eat this late," Mabel said, "but you've been going all day." Cecilia smiled and took the tray. "Thank you," she said. "You know, I used to be afraid of nights like this. Afraid people wouldn't understand what I was trying to do." Mabel sat down across from her. "They won't all understand," she said. "But the ones who matter will. Because we've been waiting on someone to say what we've known for years, that we were never invisible. Just ignored." Cecilia nodded slowly, her eyes wet with quiet conviction. Tomorrow, the lights wouldn't shine on marble floors or golden centerpieces. They would shine on faces. Real ones. Warm hands. Strong backs. Honest smiles. The people who built the room, and were finally being invited into it. The morning of the gala began with rain. Not the kind that drenched cities in grief, but the kind that whispered through the trees like a blessing, soft, steady, and cleansing. By midday, the clouds had scattered, and a pale blue sky stretched wide above Atlanta's historic West End, where a red brick building stood humming with anticipation. Inside the Monroe Foundation's chosen venue, a repurposed train station that once refused entry to black passengers, tables were being dressed in linens hand-sewn by local artisans. String lights hung low across wooden beams. The smell of slow-cooked oxtail, cornbread, and rosemary rice floated from the open kitchen. At the back of the room, a mural had been unveiled, painted over 2 weeks by artists from the South Side. A collage of faces, cooks, janitors, drivers, servers, all rendered in color, in motion, in dignity. At the center of it all stood the wall. It was tall and raw, unpainted with covered in black ink, names. Hundreds of them. Yvette. Germaine. Carmen. Regina. Names that had never once appeared on donor brochures or press releases, now displayed in bold print under the title, The Hands That Built Us. By 5 p.m., the first guests arrived, not dropped off by chauffeurs, but parking in nearby lots and walking in pairs, dressed in everything from Sunday best to simple shirts and slacks. There was no red carpet. Instead, a welcome table offered buttons that read, "I am because we are," in gold script. Cecilia stood by the entrance, greeting every person who entered. No one breezed past her. No one dared. "Welcome, Mr. Connor," she said to a retired doorman who once cleaned the sidewalk outside her first office. "Didn't think I'd ever get an invite like this," he said, blinking back tears. "You didn't get invited," she replied. "You got called home." The inside of the venue glowed not from chandeliers, but from warmth. The kind that can't be manufactured, only earned. Musicians from a local HBCU jazz ensemble played soft instrumentals. Children ran between the chairs, laughter echoing under the high rafters. Volunteers handed out plates with quiet reverence, not because they were beneath the guests, but because they were the guests. Marcus Langston arrived just before the opening remarks. He wore a charcoal blazer and a look of nervous uncertainty. He had remained on staff despite the board's pressure, choosing loyalty to the mission over comfort. But now, standing near the door, watching what the night was becoming, his uncertainty shifted into awe. He found Cecilia near the stage, speaking with a group of college-bound students from the Foundation's scholarship program. "Miss Monroe," he said, gently tapping her arm. She turned and smiled. "You made it." "I wouldn't have missed it," he replied. "This is extraordinary." Cecilia looked out over the room. "It's not extraordinary," she said. "It's overdue." At 7 p.m., the lights dimmed, and the jazz faded into silence. Cecilia stepped onto the stage. No spotlight, just her and the mic. "This building once told people like me they weren't welcome," she began. "Tonight, it tells a different story." She scanned the crowd. "For too long, we've mistaken luxury for value. We've allowed wealth to speak louder than work. But the truth is, cities don't rise because of those who sign checks. They rise because of those who carry chairs, sweep floors, pour water, hold things together when no one's watching." A hush swept the room, reverent and electric. "I have spent a lifetime building doors," she continued. "Tonight we remove the locks." The room erupted in applause. Not polite clapping, but thunder. The kind that shakes bones. Then the stories began. Not of CEOs or politicians, but of Mabel, the grandmother who cleaned bathrooms for 20 years while sending 4 children to college. Of Jermaine, who once got written up for pausing mid-shift to help a choking guest, because interrupting workflow was against policy. Of Yvette, who once held a broken oven door closed with her bare hands so that meals could still be served hot. Each one stepped onto the stage. Each one spoke. No one interrupted. No one looked away. But not everyone came to celebrate. Outside, parked 2 blocks away in a black sedan with tinted windows, Franklin Dade watched the live stream from his phone. His face remained blank as the feed showed workers speaking to a standing ovation. He dialed a number. "Yes," he said. "It's happening exactly how we feared. She's rewriting the donor hierarchy. If this spreads, we lose control of every gala under our influence." The voice on the other end said something sharp. Franklin's mouth thinned. "Understood. I'll take care of it." He stepped out of the car and walked toward the building. Inside, the energy swelled with every testimony. By the time Cecilia returned to the stage for the closing speech, the room felt baptized in truth. "I want to thank you," she said, voice steady. "Not for attending, but for belonging. This room wasn't built for you, it was built by you. And from this day forward, no celebration with my name on it will ever forget that." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. But then, a commotion at the rear. The room's attention shifted as Franklin stepped into view, flanked by 2 men in suits. He didn't wait for a mic. "Excuse me," he called out. "Sorry to interrupt this rebranding exercise." The applause faltered. Confusion rippled. Cecilia didn't move. Franklin stepped forward. "I'm Franklin Dade, former board member. and someone who's watched this foundation thrive on the shoulders of generous donors for years. I'm here to say that what you've witnessed tonight is a departure from the mission. This foundation was built on partnerships, on influence, on reputation, and it's being dismantled in real time. Gasps echoed. Some booed. Others fell quiet. Cecilia stepped toward him. "Franklin," she said, her voice like wind carving stone. "You are right about one thing. We're witnessing a dismantling. Of silence. Of hierarchy. Of the lie that only money matters." He scoffed. "You've made enemies." "I've made space," she replied. "For every name this system tried to bury." Franklin's face twisted with disdain, but he turned and walked out. He had lost the room. After the disruption, Cecilia stood alone at the front of the venue. No spotlight. No cameras. Just a room filled with people who had tasted the future and knew they couldn't return to the past. Carmen approached, eyes wet. "I didn't know we could be seen like this," she whispered. "You always could," Cecilia replied. "You just needed the mic." The morning after the gala, the Monroe Foundation's inbox overflowed. Some were hate mail, donors withdrawing, accusing Cecilia of politicizing charity, of alienating influence, and waging class warfare. But most were different. Most came from receptionists, hospital janitors, security guards, cafeteria workers, school bus drivers. People who had never attended a gala in their lives, but who had watched every second of the hands that built us online. One message read, "I watched your speech with my daughter on our second-hand phone. She asked if it meant someone like me could be important too. I told her yes, because of you." Another said, "I've worked in housekeeping for 27 years. Never had anyone say my name into a mic. Until last night." They flooded in from Mississippi, Detroit, Oakland, D.C., and across the South, every voice a brick in a new foundation being laid, one rooted not in marble, but in memory. Cecilia sat in her office that Monday morning, a mug of black coffee in one hand and her glasses perched low on her nose. She read each message, not skimming but absorbing, as if their words carried the weight of generations. Because they did. Her assistant knocked gently and peeked in. "Miss Monroe," she said, "the team is ready. They've got something for you." Cecilia raised a brow. "Something?" The woman smiled. "You'll want to see this." They led her downstairs into the foundation's community wing, where the open space had been cleared. At the center stood a tall sheet covering something rectangular. Her staff, every intern, associate, administrator, and janitor, stood in a wide circle, watching her approach. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice still warm but wary. Marcus stepped forward, holding a small card. "We wanted to thank you," he said. "Not for saving the foundation, but for reshaping it. For putting people back at the center." He nodded toward the sheet. One of the custodial staff pulled it back. Cecilia gasped softly. It was a sculpture, not carved from marble or cast in bronze, but constructed from reclaimed steel, copper wiring, and broken furniture from every event they had ever hosted. It wasn't pretty in the traditional sense. It was jagged, just like the people who had built this movement with her. At its center, molded in brushed metal, were three hands holding each other in an unbroken chain, dark skin, light skin, and weathered knuckles, all interlocked in upward motion. At the base was a single line, engraved in bold serif. "We are the ones who held the room." Cecilia blinked, eyes filling with tears she didn't bother to hide. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "You do," said Mabel, stepping forward. "Because for the first time in our lives, someone said our names and meant them." Cecilia placed her hand gently on the cold metal, her reflection fractured by the sculpture's uneven surface. It was perfect. Not long after, they moved the sculpture to the foundation's front lobby, replacing the old marble bust of Cecilia that she had never asked for but had been installed by wealthy donors years ago. That bust was now in storage. Legacy, Cecilia had come to understand, wasn't about being idolized. It was about being useful and unforgettable. Over the following months, Cecilia's choices triggered ripples far beyond Atlanta. Several other foundations, inspired by the viral clips of the gala, quietly began reevaluating their practices. Some introduced equity-based hiring policies. Others rewrote their donor events entirely. A few resisted at first, but public pressure mounted. No one wanted to be the next foundation exposed for silencing the very people their missions claimed to serve. But with change came pushback. 3 former board members resigned in protest. One threatened a lawsuit. A national media outlet ran an op-ed titled, "When Philanthropy Turns Political, Has Cecilia Monroe Gone Too Far?" Cecilia read the piece over breakfast, folded it neatly, and used it to wipe coffee off the counter. Then she donated $100,000 to a domestic workers union under the name Too Far LLC. One day, while leaving a grocery store on a quiet Sunday morning, a woman stopped her in the parking lot. She was in her late 20s, wearing scrubs, her eyes puffy from exhaustion. "You're Miss Monroe, right?" she asked, voice hesitant. Cecilia nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. I just wanted to say, I wasn't at your gala. Couldn't afford a babysitter. But I watched it. Twice." Cecilia smiled gently. "And?" "I cried," the woman said, voice cracking. "I work nights. Clean a trauma wing. Nobody ever looks at me. But when you said the names, when you made them stand on stage, it felt like you reached across the world and said, 'I see you too.'" Cecilia touched the woman's hand. "Then we did it right." The Monroe Foundation's next annual report wasn't covered in gold foil. It featured the mural from the gala. The donors were listed alphabetically. But the workers? Their names were bolded. The report was titled simply, "The Room We Rebuilt." And for the first time in the organization's history, the back pages weren't filled with financial charts or smiling headshots. They were filled with handwritten thank you notes from every staff member, cook, and volunteer who had ever been part of their events. Cecilia's letter on the opening page was short. "Legacy isn't marble. It's who you lift when no one's watching." And now, to you reading or watching this story, if Cecilia's journey moved you, if it reminded you of your worth, your labor, your right to be seen, then don't let it end here. Remember, you don't need a badge to belong. You don't need a spotlight to matter. And the next time you see someone dismissed at a velvet rope, step in. Be the voice that opens the door. Because justice isn't just served. It's shared. If this story touched you, we invite you to hit the like button. Not for us, but for the people this story represents. Share it with someone who's been overlooked. And subscribe to the channel for more real, powerful stories that remind us why voices like Cecilia's matter. In a world quick to forget, we remember the names. Because we are the ones who hold the room.